useful. Throughout our lives, we're constantly having events happen, and there are reasons for those events, and there are effects on our lives from those events. Causes is also synonymous with reasons, and effects is synonymous with outcomes or results. You'll often hear reasons and results used in our discussion today and other places. In a way, it should be called cause or effect writing, because we often write about one or the other. Be careful not to confuse them. For example, with buying a car, it has both causes and effects, reasons for buying the car, and the effects on your life of having bought a car. And sometimes they're very similar. For example, you might buy a car because you want to travel to work faster. And if you're lucky, and as a result of buying a car, you are able to travel to work faster. So I'm trying to include the obvious reasons like traveling to work faster, and the more significant or even often unnoticed ones, especially for results, because there are often unexpected results to having something happen, basically. So for example, below I mentioned there's more worries on your life. You maybe didn't plan for that, but that would be an effect upon on your life of having bought a car. I find diagrams to be really useful, such as the ones below. Here we have on this side, I have examples of reasons for buying a car, such as you want to take a trip, maybe with your friends, take a trip and you want your own vehicle. The bus is slow. Maybe you travel by bus, or you want to bring your friends with you to work or to places or to trips or other things, or maybe commute with your neighbors to work. But the effects of after buying a car, ideally, travel would be faster. But as I mentioned before, there is more worries, and we'll talk about some examples of that in a minute. And then there's maybe have less extra money. That might not have been something that you initially expected. Also be careful not to list conditions as reasons. For example, to buy a car, I need to save a lot of money. This is a condition. It is not a reason. I'm not buying a car because I saved a lot of money, but I need to save a lot of money in order to buy a car. We're not doing conditions at this point. It's just focusing on reasons for buying something or doing something. Have a look here at the organization of cause and effect writing. Notice that these two on the right and the left are very similar. The one on the left is about causes, the one on the right is about effects. They both have a similar essay format of introduction, body, and conclusion. But pay attention when you're talking about causes, somewhere in there, especially in a shorter paragraph, it could be just a sentence, you briefly mention the effects. And if you write about effects, you can briefly mention the causes. Be very careful. You don't want the people to think that's your topic sentence. So you want to follow that of your topic sentence afterwards and focus on causes and effects. In our writing, we're going to use a map format. We call it a map because we identify exactly what's going to follow in a paragraph. So I mentioned that the causes, the two causes I'm going to write about in my topic sentence or my paragraph. Here I mentioned 2 to 3, but we'll be doing 2 in this section. And then the conclusion of both of these, I focus on, for example, you could talk about, there's different options, but you could talk about the most important cause or the most important effect. And again, this will be the format of your homework assignment. So refer back to this as you're writing. Here is some special content for cause and effect writing. I've given 2 examples here of topic sentences for both the causes and effects. So if you're writing about causes, you might have something like this, although there are many reasons for whatever. Blank and blank, these right here are my 2 my 2 supporting points. And I might say they're the most important or the most relevant or most serious or most significant. Some general word there that adequately describes both of your points. And then below you can see this about the effects. It's the same format, and just you want to include an adjective that's related to all the effects. I personally I'm really fond of this setup of although, because I think it's really important to admit that you don't know everything and that there are other causes, there are other reasons. I mean, we know that's true, but sometimes we write as if our reasons are the reasons why people do something or the effects on people's lives. And it's really important for the reader to accept you and the teacher, if you're in a class, to understand, to realize that you also understand that your topic is more serious than you're able to describe in this time, to recognize and to admit that early on. Remember, the purpose is to inform the reader of your main points, but also let them know that there are others. So for example, let's go back to the first one here. Although there are many reasons for buying a car, travel time and flexibility are the most important. So I'm going to write a paragraph about travel time and flexibility. For the second one here, although there are many effects of buying a car, travel time and extra worries are the most significant in my life. Here I've narrowed it down just to my life. There is some special grammar that you'll find common in cause and effect in the way it's written. You don't have to use it, and if you're a beginner writer, you should probably avoid it. But I just want to identify this because you're going to see it in the work that I've done and my examples here. And I also suggest that you look at the websites that I'll show you later and look up gerunds in there and may look up infinitives as well. Notice that gerunds are nouns. They look like verbs with an ing, but they're actually nouns, and they're used in the place of nouns. And they have the subject, or the role of a noun, the function of a noun in a sentence. You probably actually used them before. For example, driving is really fun. Driving is the subject. In the same way, you could say exercise is really fun, or coffee is really tasty, something like that. You have an adjective after the be verb. So in this example, driving is really fun. Now I could expand that. We call that a gerund phrase. Okay, driving. Driving my car is really fun, or driving quickly is really fun. And in this sentence, driving is still the subject. And if you notice in the sentence below, this is the preposition and this is the object. Here we have a preposition and object. Here we have the subject and the object of the verb hate in the sentence. All those are roles of nouns. Again, you should definitely read about this in other places, but I'll read these. There are many reasons for buying a car. As a result of traveling by bus, I'm grumpy when I get to work. Because taking the bus is boring, I prefer to drive. Since I hate being in a crowded bus, I'm very happy to be in my own car. Now, in this first one I wrote, there are many reasons for buying a car. Another word for buying is purchase, and purchase can be a noun. I could have said there are many reasons for the purchase of a car, but I find that buying is really helpful. It's also a little bit easier, I think, to use gerunds because it just think of the verb that's right and add ing, and it makes for a correct noun, and that's a little more simple in some ways. But the grammar is a little more complicated, so keep that in mind. There is some very useful vocabulary that you're going to see in cause and effect writing. It focuses on causes, obviously, and effects. So, for example, because, since, and so are really helpful for causes. But you're going to use it in both cause and effect writing because you're going to write about causes and effects in both of them at different times in the sentences. But then there's also phrases like as a result, therefore, thus, consequently. Now, because and since can be at the middle or beginning or middle of a complex sentence arrangement. And note the comma location in the second example, or it's actually the first example. I bought a car because traveling by bus took a really long time. Here, because is in the middle. This section here, I bought a car, that's a sentence. Because traveling by bus took a really long time, also a sentence. They both have subjects and verbs. We would call this second one, because, would be considered a subordinate clause. But they're combined and there's no comma. Notice that. The other way of doing it is putting because beginning. And I have the exact same sentence structure because traveling by bus took a really long time. Here I've added a comma. I bought a car. If you put it at the beginning, also with the case of since, which has kind of a similar but opposite meaning of because. So keep that in mind with the comma use. They both have the same meaning. However, to emphasize, you might want to emphasize what's most important to you at one time, but they really have, again, the same meaning. It's also nice just to add variety. If you're using because a lot, try moving at the beginning of a sentence or using since and changing it around. And then notice the two gerunds that I've chosen to use here. I've got traveling, and then again I have down here sitting. So the example down below, as a result, I can get to work faster. I bought a car last week. As a result, I can get to work faster. I have a period, and notice this comma here. This is a prepositional phrase. As a result, thus, comma, I can sleep later in the morning. Period. I'm also happier because I didn't spend 2 hours sitting in a bus. This is a semicolon. Consequently, comma, I enjoy my job more. I want to point out that these words, as a result, therefore, thus, and consequently, all have the same grammar format. They always have a comma after them, and there's always a period or semicolon before them. So consider them as almost like an island, and they're surrounded on one side by a period and on one side by a comma. Or instead of the period, you can have a semicolon. It's very important. Those are different words than because. Because will not have that format. You will not have a comma after because. Okay. Here we have some live practice of cause and effect writing. First, let's talk about some general large parts of it, and then we'll go through and read it together, just like I would if you had written this and I was giving you feedback. Okay, this is the effects of buying a car. If you want to go back and look at the diagram that I gave you at the beginning of this video about the effects and causes of buying a car, you'll notice that in the effects section that there are two negatives of the three effects I note. So in just 200 words, I only have a space for just 2 points. So I've mentioned the one obvious positive in my topic sentence, and thus I'm able to focus on the two negatives. You can organize it a different way. That's okay. So let's look at the parts. We have, I kind of have a little bit of background information here. I've always wanted my own car, and last week I finally had enough money in the bank. And then the section here, the main reason I bought it was to avoid taking a long bus ride to work. This is the reason, this is my cause. Why did I buy it? My focus is on the effects. I talked about mentioning a cause or a couple causes. Now I have the topic sentence I use. While there have been many results of my car purchase, I could have skipped this part if I was doing negatives and positives together, but then I have including a faster commute to work, unexpected costs, and additional worries have also been effects. So in this case, I'm identifying that there are many reasons why people buy cars, or many results of buying a car, I should say. But I'm going to focus on unexpected costs and additional worries. And then I also indicate that I recognize that faster commute is an issue, but I'm not going to really focus on that. And by the way, commute is a vocabulary word to describe transport to and from your workplace. So let's go to the rest of it. We have main point. First is my transition word to identify that. And then you'll see lastly, or in this case, it's the second one. You'll see at the next point. And then you can find my conclusion fairly quickly. If you look, you'll find, here it is, in conclusion. And then I indicate the most important one, the most important effect. And from my experience, has been the added expense, as you'll see when you read it. So let's start beginning. I've always wanted my own car, and last week I finally had enough money in the bank to buy a Chevy Cavalier. The main reason I bought it was to avoid taking a long bus ride to work. While there have been many results of my car purchase, including a faster commute to work, unexpected costs and additional worries have also been effects. First, after I spent all my money on the car and the extra features like a good stereo, I didn't have any money left. Thus, when I needed to buy a parking permit at work, I had to borrow money from my parents. Other unexpected expenses include maintenance and gas. Point 2. Lastly, these expenses have caused me to be more worried. Thus, I haven't been sleeping well. I have nightmares about getting scratches on my car. In conclusion, the most important effect has been the added expenses. Now, I could have written more than this 150 words, but I just didn't. I kind of ran out of space. You're welcome to write more or up to 200 words for us to review for your homework assignment. This is the end of the third lesson on essay types. Next week, we will discuss narrative writing. So begin to think now of a funny or interesting thing that happened to you when you were young, or an interesting story that you read once and would like to write about again. We'll talk about that next week. Good luck on the homework. Let me know if you have any questions.